Hello and welcome to Buy Africa, the show where we focus on investment opportunities around the continent. I'm Tepo Modiba, and thanks for joining me. Tonight, I'm joined by Jimmy Ogbobine, Senior Analyst at Augusto & Co. Jimmy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to touch a little bit on the telecommunications sector in Nigeria in particular. What is the structure of the industry between mobile and fixed line?
Well, you barely have anything in fixed line right now. It's all mobile. It's all mobile. If you have less than 5% in fixed line, and it's the consumers have been wired in the last decade to think mobile, to behave mobile. So people just look up to fixed lines for other things like data connectivity and all that. But even at that, it's becoming more and more unpopular. So it's an industry in Nigeria right now that is heavily into mobile, and we believe that this trend will remain, because you have quite a number of consumers whose first entry into telephones in Nigeria have been mobile, and it will be very difficult transitioning such consumers into fixed line. So that's the situation right now in Nigeria, owing to the way the GSM revolution started in Nigeria, about a decade and a half ago.
Sure. And Jimmy, tell me, in terms of penetration, what is the mobile penetration in Nigeria?
The mobile penetration in Nigeria is quite high as well, around 80 to 90, and that's because the numbers are a little bit skewed. You have quite a number of people who have 2-3 lines, because a number of consumers who do not want, we face a lot of outages on our phones, and you have quite a number of consumers who want to be connected all the time. So you have a lot of 2-3 multiple SIMing actually. That's the term in the industry. You have a lot of multiple SIMing, and what multiple SIMing has done, it has also increased penetration at the moment right now.
And in terms of scope then for, I guess, further subscriber growth, what would you say the outlook is like for the sector?
Okay, right now in terms of subscriber growth, outlook is quite very, very poor, because we're maxing out on voice. Voice is about 70% of industry revenues right now, and we're doing the best we can in terms of voice. In Nigeria right now, if you probably do not have a mobile telephone, it's because you can't afford one, not because you do not want one. So, and there's very little marketing going to new consumers, because the biggest new consumers are the younger demography who come into the age of responsibility, where their parents now say to them, okay, I'll get you a new phone. So that's about the biggest consumer class without phones, and that's about the biggest new growth area. But in terms of having adult consumers, if you have adult consumers who do not have a phone at this stage, then it's because they're at the very bottom of the pyramid in terms of income classification. So that's how it's currently, structured. But the next growth area for the entire industry obviously has to be data.
Right.
That's where you see the real growth potentials. In terms of voice, you can say that fairly well enough Nigeria has maxed out. But in terms of data, and what's happening in data is what Nigeria experienced about a decade and a half ago, where we did not have the infrastructure to drive even voice, and that infrastructure had to be built. So that's the difficult phase of the industry right now, building broadband capacity across the industry. But unfortunately, in terms of data, the kind of regulatory and fiscal support we got a decade and a half ago for voice, we're not experiencing such support for data in the country at the moment. There's so much difficulties, especially with technical issues like rights of way. There isn't a holistic approach right now by the entire country, state governments, local governments, and the federal government, into driving broadband penetration across the country.
So what does that mean in terms of, I guess, the relationship then between this potential for data and the underlying telecoms businesses who are trying to grow in Nigeria?
I think on the part of the government, I think we're missing out on the big picture. We're still seeing data growth, broadband, as strictly aligned to the telecoms industry. But the country and the government itself isn't getting the big picture, which is that, for instance, the entire the mobile banking in Nigeria, for instance, especially with the the ICT increase in ICT penetration of ICT offerings by banks, the ATMs, you know, it's all built on the back of telecoms. You have an Amazon-like company in Nigeria, you have companies like Jumia, Konga, all these firms are built on the back of telecoms, you know, how much broadband you have. So many of these services, for instance, right now, strictly confined to what you call the LAP market, Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt, because that's where you have the concentration of broadband, because the government right now isn't seeing the big picture, how much industry growth we can generate across the entire economy on the back of broadband penetration, you know, and that's because we're seeing it exclusively from the prism and myopia of telecoms, that, oh, this is just a telecoms growth.
What are the, I guess if you want to call it, spill-off industries that are benefiting from a growth in data usage across Nigeria?
So now, looking at the industries that are really experiencing good times with the increase in broadband penetration, you're looking at the logistics industry, for instance, you're looking at retail. Like I said, the retail space is being redefined in Nigeria. You now have companies that have cloned the Amazon model, you know, companies like Jumia and Konga, Udala, basically make your orders online and then you have delivery. So that entire space is being built on the back of the telecoms infrastructure. And then you have mobile banking. Nigeria has a lot of mobile banking services, offerings by the banks, and telephone banking and things like that. Not in the Kenyan model, which we would have preferred, you know, if we're looking for the real growth. Not in the Kenyan model, but still, all these services, all these mobile banking services, you know, telephone services and all, are also built on the back of, mobile broadband penetration. But we can take it beyond, like I said, the three major markets in the country, Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt, into new growth areas across the 6 regions, 6 geopolitical regions in the country. And with that, especially in these times of recession, where the country is looking for low-hanging fruits for new growth areas, I believe that broadband penetration can actually offer us these forms of exponential growth that we're looking for.
All right. So,
and that we badly need as a country right now.
So if I understand what you're saying, you're really saying that actually, if by not facilitating faster growth in the telecom space, you're actually inhibiting sectors like mobile banking that have been shown to do quite well, especially in low banking penetration markets.
Okay, now let's separate the mobile banking issue you just raised now. Like I said, the Nigerian mobile banking product right now, it's not the M-Pesa model of Kenya that the world has come to celebrate. What we basically have is conventional banks offering banking services through mobile apps, through telephones. So you can do a lot of accounts transfer, money transfers and all that. But you've got to have a bank account with which you now, you know, access through your telephones. The M-Pesa model is entirely different, like you know very well. So what we would wish for is for Nigeria to trend the path of M-Pesa for one major reason. When we trend the path of M-Pesa, then we can bring the unbanked. We've got a lot of initiatives that we've pursued as a country, hoping to bring in the unbanked into the formal banking system, formal financial system. But these initiatives have all failed and have been stymied because the poverty levels here is quite large. If you look at Nigeria, if you're talking about 60% of the country living below the poverty line, then you're talking of like as many as 7 West African countries, 7 to 8 West African countries put together. So that's a large population that's still left out of the formal banking system. But yet this large population all have telephones. And if we have the M-Pesa model, then you can actually bring all of them into the formal financial system. But the major reason why we've not followed the M-Pesa system is because of myopia. We've been wary. The central bank has been nervous about, you know, handing over banking to telecoms, which hasn't happened in Kenya.
Okay, if we're going to take a view in terms of telecoms in Nigeria, and we're taking a positive view, which sectors will benefit from it, I guess, in the short term? I know you touched on mobile banking and the structure of it, but beyond banking, again, which are the industries and sectors, I guess, investment opportunities that arise from a play on telecommunications?
I'll cautiously bet on data, broadband penetration, a cautious bet. And that's because the government isn't seeing the big picture, like I said earlier. If we have the kinds of fiscal incentives, the kind of structural adjustments we made in 99-2000 to drive voice, if we have that kind of effort being put into data and broadband penetration, then I would place a bigger bet on it. So right now, I'm cautiously optimistic about the potentials of broadband and data. Both what we need to see is the supporting regulatory and policy framework to drive broadband and data in the country.
And then finally, in terms of, I guess, the major players in Nigeria, who is really well positioned in the telecom space to take advantage of any progress from a regulatory perspective?
By no means is MTN. It's MTN. MTN is well positioned, despite recent troubles, they're well positioned to take advantage of any opportunities, despite the poor regulatory response to support broadband and data. MTN still has the capacity and the capital to push investments and even to get the government, to steer the government, to steer policy making into supporting initiatives that would help drive these. But even without government support, MTN is the best positioned, to take advantage of these opportunities and potentials, as it were. The other firms, it will all depend on how much investments each firm is ready to put on the table, basically, for you to take cognizance of these opportunities. Because like I said, most of these opportunities right now lie outside the Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt regions, where you have heavy concentration of investments and capital. So how much are you ready to deploy to the other regions which are fairly considered poor in terms of returns on capital, returns on investments? And only MTN has that kind of financial capacity and capital to pursue investments across the country.
Perfect. Let's leave it there. Thanks to my guest, Jimmy Ogbobine, Senior Analyst at Augusto & Co. That's all from Buy Africa this week. Remember to follow me on Twitter. That's @Modiba_Tepo. And send us your thoughts about the show using the hashtag BuyAfrica. From myself and the team, goodbye.